Hello, I'm Rahul Tandon, and this is Business Matters here on the BBC World Service. Today we're live in the United States and New Zealand as President Biden speaks in Michigan as he tries to salvage his candidacy for the presidential election in November after a series of recent gaffes. We'll bring you the thoughts of voters there.
I think Joe Biden can still do it.
The honest feeling was fear. You know, it got me nervous and it got me scared because we're getting very close. It's just terrifying that it's falling apart right now.
And we'll hear from one of Donald Trump's biggest Republican supporters, Vivek Ramaswamy.
The reality is President Biden has not effectively been really the president of the United States in any meaningful sense. He is a figurehead for the managerial class that's actually running the show beneath him.
That's Business Matters. First, though, the latest BBC News.
Hello, I'm Govinda Gill with the BBC News. President Biden has attempted to put his re-election campaign back on track with a defiant rally in the swing state of Michigan. He told the crowd in Detroit he was the only politician to have beaten Donald Trump and promised to do it again in November.
Folks, probably noticed there's a lot of speculation lately. What's Joe Biden going to do? Is he going to stay in the race? Is he going to drop out? Here's my answer. I am running, and we're going to win. I'm not going to change it. Just today, the Marist poll released a national poll that has me beating Trump 50 to 48.
A growing number of Democrats have called on the president to step aside from the contest. 5 people linked to one of Ecuador's biggest criminal gangs have been convicted of the murder of the presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio nearly a year ago, Leonardo Rocha reports.
A court in Quito sentenced 2 senior members of the Los Lobos gang, Carlos Angulo and Laura Castilla, to 34 years in prison as co-conspirators. 3 others were given 12-year sentences. More than 70 people gave evidence during the trial, including a key witness who said the gang had been offered $200,000 to kill Mr. Villavicencio. He was shot several times at the end of a rally in August last year. Mr. Villavicencio was a member of Congress and former journalist who spoke out against the increasing involvement of organized crime with politicians in Ecuador.
The US judge has dismissed the manslaughter case against the Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin after ruling that the state withheld key evidence about the fatal shooting on the set of his film Rust. The information concerned live ammunition that killed a cinematographer, Alina Hutchins, in 2021. Emma Vardy was at the court.
Tears poured from Alec Baldwin, and there was a collective sigh of relief in the courtroom when the astonishing dismissal was read out by the judge. She said the state had withheld evidence, and there was no way for the court to right this wrong. The dismissal came days into Alec Baldwin's criminal trial in New Mexico, after Mr. Baldwin's attorneys argued that prosecutors hadn't turned over a key piece of evidence, a batch of bullets, to the defense team. This box contained a mix of dummy rounds and live bullets, which it's claimed came from the weapons supplier to the film set.
The Red Cross says that at least 21 people have been killed and more than 60 injured when a school building in central Nigeria collapsed. The National Emergency Management Agency says it has completed search and rescue operations at the site. You're listening to World News from the BBC. At least 6 badly decomposed bodies have been found wrapped in plastic sacks at a rubbish dump in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. The police say the bodies were both female and had been severely mutilated. There are reports of police firing tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse crowds at the site. Elon Musk says he's looking forward to a battle in court with the European Union after it's accused his social media firm X of breaching online content rules. Block's tech regulator said the site's blue tick system was potentially deceiving users into thinking accounts were verified, when in fact anyone can pay the symbol. NATO has said the situation in Kosovo remains unstable and could get worse. The warning comes after the authorities in Pristina have imposed a series of measures targeting the Serb minority. Our Balkans correspondent is Guy Dillon.
NATO's added almost 1,000 troops to its KFOR peacekeeping force over the past year. That was a response to unrest in majority Serb North Kosovo. The situation's currently calm, but NATO warns there's potential for more trouble because relations between Pristina and Belgrade remain dysfunctional. Kosovo's authorities have also been making life difficult for the Serb minority. They've banned the use of Serbian currency and vehicle number plates, and recently issued eviction notices to dozens of residents in the town of North Mitrovica. NATO says these unilateral actions could trigger an atmosphere for the spread of violence.
Pakistan has reached a deal with the International Monetary Fund for a $7 billion bailout. As part of the agreement, which still needs to be signed off by the IMF's executive board, the money will be handed out over 3 years. In return, Pakistan's government has promised to implement reforms and set up efforts to collect more tax. That's the latest world news from the BBC.
Hello and welcome to Business Matters here on the BBC World Service. I'm Alan Tandon on the programme. Today, plenty of stories, including the vending machines for bullets in the US using artificial intelligence tech to identify buyers.
Only then, when the identification is verified that they're of legal age and they are who they are, can the transaction be complete.
As always, to guide us through some of the topics that we will be looking at, I'll be joined by two guests on opposite sides of the world. We welcome back Lorianne LaRocca, who is senior editor with CNBC. You know, this time last night, Lorianne, we were gauging reaction to President Biden's press conference. He's just finished speaking in Michigan. People saying a really energized performance there. He spoke longer than normal, about 35 minutes. Give us your sense. We're going to hear some audio very shortly. But give us your sense of what's happening with President Biden at the moment and the concerns that there are about them. Have they been diminished in the last 24 hours or increased?
I would say for a good chunk of individuals, largely a lot of these wealthy donors, they would like President Biden to step aside. And you've got 90 million in donations are being withheld right now because they do not believe that he can win. You saw two mishaps. He of course calling Zelensky Putin. Vice President Trump, and then just also I don't know. A lot of people are concerned. I have a lot of contacts that are lifelong Democrats, and they've been in the system, and they are indeed very worried. And the longer that President Biden continues, it's going to be harder, if you will, for that transition. It could happen, but it could be very messy. But we'll see what happens. He has another big interview on Monday. But this presidency has been very scripted and very tightly controlled over the last 4 years in terms of access, in terms of how long he's going to be interviewed. All of those things. And of course, the news came out about the interview from the black radio station that the Biden administration wanted it edited, and so they had to edit it, and it was even scripted questions. And yesterday, those questions he already knew in advance, in terms of which reporters that he wanted to speak to. So I think if to assume that it's over, I don't. I think it would be a little too presumptuous. Will he step down? Heaven only knows. But I think over the course of the next couple of days, particularly when we see him sit down with Lester Holt at NBC News, we'll see how he does. But we're freaked out by the whisper.
Haven't we? Somebody who's potentially been mentioned as a replacement for President Biden, meeting the New Zealand Prime Minister.
Yes, that's right. Our Prime Minister Chris Luxon on his first trip to the US met with Governor Newsom just today. In fact, and it's reported in the newspaper here today, this morning in New Zealand, as Luxon meets the man who may replace Biden. However, Gavin Newsom was very firm in responding to New Zealand media questions that he supports Biden and will do all the way through to the election day. So we'll see. But it is a puzzle, our Prime Minister out there trying to do things for New Zealand trade and our reputation, but the only thing our media are asking him is, are you concerned about President Biden or Trump taking power based on what we've seen the two of them in live situations?
It's remarkable, isn't it? It's a question that I think any American politician, wherever they go in the world, are being asked at the moment. That is because we are seeing more and more Democrats standing up and saying to President Biden, you need to step down. And the majority of them at the moment is still supporting him. He is in the state of Michigan. He has just come off after giving a 35-minute speech, which if you look at some of the comments that are beginning to come in, has been one of his more energized performances so far. He has been attempting to reassure voters and fellow Democrats who have concerns about his age.
For the longest time, I was too young because I was the second youngest man ever elected to the United States Senate. And now I'm too old. But I know, hopefully, with age comes a little wisdom. And hopefully that, in this moment, I think the alternative is not much of an alternative. And I do think ethics matter. I do think decency matters. I do think we should reflect that we're an optimistic, we're a decent, we're an honorable country. And I give my word, last thing I'll say, I have never been more optimistic about America's possibilities than I am today.
But are people optimistic about his possibilities? Well, let's hear from some Democrat supporters in the swing state who've been speaking to our North America editor, Sarah Smith.
I think Joe Biden can still do it.
Yeah?
Yep, for sure.
You worried though?
A little, like everyone is, but I'm not overly worried about it.
The honest feeling was fear. You know, it got me nervous and it got me scared because we're getting very close. It's just terrifying that it's falling right now, in my opinion.
The Democratic campaign, the Biden's campaign for
Biden's falling apart, in my opinion.
someone else coming in this late in the campaign, you think they could beat Donald Trump?
That's very tough. I mean, at this point, it might be better just to keep pushing through and go for it. We're already in this. He already has 4 years, so might as well try for another 4.
He's out for another 4 years in the land.
That's debatable. If he's up to 4 years or not, I think we'll just have to wait and see.
That's quite a risk to take when you're talking about the president of the United States.
I'd rather take that risk than have Donald Trump in office again.
Zoe Clark is a political reporter with the National Public Radio Commission.
Someone 20 minutes ago who is, we shall say, a Democrat, a Biden supporter, and basically said what we're hearing a lot of, which is she has deep concerns about the current president and some of the faculties and some of what seems to be diminished faculties ever since that debate 2 weeks ago, but that she views the former president, Donald Trump, as such an existential threat that she is willing to vote for Biden no matter what. I just got off the phone with Michigan Congresswoman Hillary Slotkin. She is the first Michigan Democrat in the U.S. House to call for Joe Biden to step down. She said it's very troubling for her to do this, but she's calling on him to do it. But, she's also saying if he remains in the race, she will vote for him.
We have on Business Matters, we heard about this last night. There's lots of voices from the Democrats, apart from the Republicans. What do they make of the events that are taking place amongst their opponents? Well, I've been speaking to one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters, Vivek Ramaswamy, back President.
Well, look, I think it's a matter of the standards that you've set. I expect higher standards of the U.S. Commander-in-Chief, not to refer to President Zelensky as Mr. Putin, which I thought was beneath the U.S. presidency. Same thing referring to his opponent in the presidential election as Vice President Trump. Yes, those are gaps, those are verbal slip-ups, but the fact that we're applying a standard so low to the U.S. presidency itself, I think shows how far our own standards have fallen. And the reality is President Biden has not effectively been States in any meaningful sense. He is a figurehead for the managerial class that's actually running the show beneath him. And I think that's the deeper problem, not just in the United States, but across the country, the modern West, and Western democracies.
Do you think that he will be the Democratic nominee come November?
I think it's unlikely.
Who will be the Democratic?
Look, that's an open question. In the modern United States, the Democratic Party has a fixation on identity politics, the politics of race, gender, and sexuality. As a consequence, Biden got himself what you could think of as the corporate context would call a poison pill with Kamala Harris as the vice president. She was somebody who was wildly unpopular. In the Democratic primary, she didn't even make it to the Iowa caucus. Yet she got selected as the vice president, partly because of, foremost, her race and gender as a black woman. So the reality is that that was the reason for choosing her. That's now an albatross. They can't pass over her for those attributes unless they go with somebody else who has those same attributes. So pragmatically, I believe there's two viable choices for who could succeed Biden this year. It's either Kamala Harris or it's Michelle Obama. And we'll come down to how much the Democrats are willing to really force themselves to put the best candidate forward versus putting just another candidate Biden forward. And that's going to play out, I believe, in the next couple of months between now and the Democratic convention in late August.
I'm sure many people would disagree with that in terms of identity politics being the reason that Kamala Harris was chosen. This is a very fiercely contested.
Look, you may be pushing back on me because I think many Republicans are, I think, too complacent right now. I am a bit of a minority voice in the Republican Party saying that complacency is not enough. A lot of people in the Republican camp appear to be celebrating like this election is over. I believe this election has not even yet gotten started until the Democrats really put up their actual nominee. So is this a foregone conclusion that one side or the other is going to win? Far from it. I think this is going to be deeply contested until the very end. And I think far from it, complacency is actually a major risk for the Republican Party. Distraction is a major risk. With all of the shenanigans going on about who the Democrats are going to nominate or not, that's all that many Republican pundits and others, even politicians, are talking about today. Instead of having a clear-eyed vision of who we are and what we actually stand for. And so if your point is that this thing is far from over, I would say I agree with you. And the only question that determines whether Republicans are going to succeed is not whether we just criticize the other side. That part's easy. What do we actually stand for? What are we running to? And that's one of my calls to action for the party that I think is going to lead us to success if we rise to that occasion.
Last question on this. Aren't both candidates, if we're honest about this, too old here? Not just President Biden, Donald Trump as well. If he is elected again, he'll be 82 when he leaves office. Both these candidates are too old, and the American people seem to be sensitive.
Well, look, you're speaking to somebody, myself, I ran for U.S. president this cycle, and I was the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. And one of the issues that many voters did have with my candidacy is they said, hey, we love a lot of what you stand for. You're too young and not experienced enough. So I think this is up to the voters of the United States of America to decide. That's the beauty of our system. The reality is the Democrats didn't have that primary process this time around. So Joe Biden is, 81, 82, but you're looking at him being 86 years old by the time he leaves office, and in a state of sad cognitive decline. I'm not making fun of him for that. The reality is he may suffer some kind of dementia, and this is sad.
But let's be fair, there is no evidence of that cognitive decline as yet.
I disagree with you. I think anybody who is a psychiatrist or a neurologist that watches him 8 years ago versus today to say that there's no cognitive decline is a ridiculous assertion. To the contrary, why would they have had a Parkinson's disease expert show up at the White House 7 to 8 times in the last year without revealing that to the public? Again, I'm not making fun of Joe Biden for this. I think it's a sad thing that so many Americans and people around the world suffer from this. This is not a laughing matter. But the reality is, who's the commander-in-chief of the United States of America? This man is not at the top of his own game. He's not at the top of the cognitive game that most people have been the president of the United States before. That's just a hard fact at this point. I've gotten to know Donald Trump a lot since leaving the primary. Look at the way he spoke. Look at the way he handled himself in the debate. Look at the way he's able to handle himself extemporaneously. This is a man who's sharper than many people who may be in their 40s or 50s or 60s. And the voters did go through an extensive primary process and put him up as the nominee in a way that did not happen in the Democratic Party. And I think that's actually coming back to bite Democrats. The party that claims to stand for democracy didn't really use a democratic process this time around to select their nominee. I predict that might still yet be ahead. That may be where they actually land. But nonetheless, I think that's the difference between Biden and Trump and how they got to where they are.
Vivek Ramaswamy there. Lorianne, it is a story that is grabbing headlines all over the world here, but In terms of those donors that we were talking about before, we are seeing money being withdrawn, but will they have that much influence, do you think, the big donors?
I definitely do. I mean, you need the money. Right.
We're having problems with your line, Lorianne. We're going to come back to you a little bit later. On this issue, Colin, of age, you obviously had Jacinda Ardern, then you as the Prime Minister of New Zealand, somebody who was very young. She, of course, has left office. Now, did age ever become a question in a sort of reverse way with her?
A little bit it did. There were some people who traditionalists, if you like, who felt that was a problem. It was also the issue that she had a baby while she was Prime Minister, which is definitely a first for New Zealand. But there was a very strong pushback against people who said, that was unfair, and there's absolutely no reason someone her age, her experience, couldn't be a good Prime Minister. But also, we have a different system in New Zealand. There's a structure around it. There are very experienced ministers with her in the government, indeed other parties. So it's a different setup with the states looking at it from this distance. Our newspaper, The Post here in Wellington today, its weekend edition, just said we're watching two stubborn old men who really should be enjoying their retirement on the golf course and not scrapping for the Oval Office. And I think, I agree with that. I think, Joe Biden could be having a kind of Jimmy Carter type second life right now. The guy who saved democracy and beat back Trump in 2016, and could have been managed so much better. But I wonder about the structures around the Democratic Party. We know how Trump won through in the Republican selection process in spite of all the baggage he carries. But with the Democrats, I just wonder how they got to this point.
Yeah, I think a lot of people across the world having that. Let's move over to Pakistan, where the Supreme Court has granted the party of the jail former Prime Minister Imran Khan more seats in Parliament. The move could weaken the current government's grip on power and could be the start of a major political upset. Is our correspondent in Pakistan, Caroline Davis.
Even from the very beginning, we saw this current government formed because they don't have the most number of seats. That's always been a potential worry. It's a fragile potential government. Now, so far that has held. It's still too early to say whether or not this is going to start symbolising some sort of massive shift towards Imran Khan's party. We haven't seen that yet, but the question is this just going to be about the reserve seats, or are we going to start seeing other movement happening inside the parliament?
It's been a busy day in Pakistan because the country has also reached an important deal with the International Monetary Fund for $7 billion bailout. There's been reports of Nadia Afzal, fellow in foreign policy at the Brookings Institution based in Washington DC, also the author of Pakistan Under Siege: Extremism, Society and Peace. Nadia, thanks for joining us once again on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the economics first. This bailout, and we've spoken to you about it on many occasions, the economic challenges facing Pakistan. This money was desperately needed, wasn't it?
It was. So this, follows a stabilization program, a standby agreement that the Pakistani government had put in place last year. So Pakistan is sort of on stable footing, but needed this new program. This is going to be about a 3-year program, and this IMF program will in turn unlock more funding. So this is not the only funding Pakistan needs to service its debt requirements. It is hoping for restructuring of loans with China. It is hoping for some money from the Gulf countries. But together, this is sort of all part and parcel of a stabilization program that takes Pakistan further away from default, which it veered very close to last year.
To get the money, the government has to do certain things. They're going to have to collect more tax as well, is one thing. They'll have to cut down on spending. Taxation on fuel will also become an issue. They have to do some measures which are not going to be popular with the public, and this is not a particularly popular government anyway.
Exactly, and they've already preemptively put in place those measures. So the budget that was announced last month, in June, put in place higher taxes, and there's major criticism of the government on those higher taxes because they tax the already taxed classes, the salaried classes. estate, the tax net, people who invest in real estate, think about the military and so on. And so there's a lot of criticism that basically the budget has burdened those who are already feeling burdened because of inflation, and as you mentioned, high fuel and electricity prices, and those are coming through the summer with very high tariffs. And so you hear these stories of households basically having their entire salary essentially going to their electricity, and then food and everything else is something that they have to figure out how to pay.
What the IMF wants to see as well as political experience. If we turn to the politics of the Supreme Court now, what is your interpretation of what that could mean for Imran Khan's party?
Well, I think, this is a major win for Imran Khan's party because it basically gives it the status of a party again. And so it's allocated the seats, the reserved seats to it, but it also, fully recognized it as a party, which it had kind of been stripped of that status leading up to the February election. So in that sense, to the extent that people want to feel represented in Parliament, this is something that can be seen as a relief for those who, the many who had supported Khan's party who felt like their representation was being snatched away from them. What it does is it reduces the power of the current ruling coalition. So, it serves as an important check on the ruling coalition, but it reduces their power. So, is the ruling coalition really fragile? I mean, it is a majority, but it is only a majority because it's a coalition of parties. Anytime that coalition fractures, it's a problem. However, I would say that there are signs that this coalition might be stable, and that is that it has a very good relationship with Pakistan's military leadership. The Prime Minister is a very pro-military, pro-establishment person, and the President is a political survivor. And so you might well see this government, despite this win for Imran Khan's party, last a few years or a full term.
Well, that would be almost the first for Pakistan, wouldn't it? Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Colin, a quick question for you on this. The emerging economies, one of the big problems they're facing at the moment is they have debt, and interest rates have been high across the world, which means it's a huge economic challenge.
Yeah, that's right. Just here the country's inflation rate at the start of the year, but it's about half of it now. It's still high. And here the finance minister had said we need this IMF deal because we need to attract more foreign investment. However, here and there they're already paying back the same countries where they want to get further investment to slingshot off this IMF deal. They still owe money to in the Gulf and China. So that is an extremely tricky balance.
It is an extremely tricky balance, but not one just Pakistan's facing. We've been talking a lot about Kenya and our business programs as well. Lorianne is back with us. We're going to hear more from her about President Biden when we come back after the news.
This is the BBC World Service with stories from the past, as told by the people who were there.
My shoes had a most important feature as they had been a witness with myself to the crimes of the occupation.
We knew what was happening over in South Africa. Morally, we just couldn't handle the South African goods. And I think because we wouldn't go away, the Irish government had to try and do something.
Because this pickup was coordinated by multiple organizations in government, we were very cautious about transporting the pandas back to Taipei.
As we enter Johannesburg's airspace, the pilot announced, "We welcome Sarah Baratman back into a country of birth after 192 years."
Witness History at bbcworldservice.com/witness history or wherever you get your BBC podcasts.
You're listening to Business Matters here on BBC World
supporters who beat Donald Trump again in November's election. Mr. Biden has faced growing calls from his own party to step aside and make way for someone younger. And to the stage of Detroit to chants of "Don't you quit" and 4 more years. A court in Ecuador has given prison sentences to 5 people for involvement in the assassination of a presidential candidate. Fernando Villavicencio was shot dead at the end of the campaign until August last year. The violence happens to a notorious criminal gang. The Hollywood star Alec Baldwin has wept in court after a judge threw out a manslaughter case against him. Mr. Baldwin's defense team had accused police and prosecutors of withholding evidence about Henry Hutchins' death on the set of the film Rust. The cinematographer was fatally wounded, went off in the actor's hands. The Red Cross says the collapse of a school in central Nigeria has killed at least 21 people. Crowds have been searching for survivors in Plateau State. Pakistan has agreed a $7 billion bailout with the International Monetary Fund. The government has promised to implement reforms and step up efforts to collect more tax. Political parties in South Africa have called for an investigation into renewed corruption allegations against the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Julius Malema, who denies accepting bribes. NATO has warned of violence in Kosovo because of measures imposed against its Serb minority. The authorities have banned the use of Serbian vehicle number plates and currency. Elon Musk says he's looking forward to a battle in court with the European Union after it accused his social media firm X of breaching online content rules. The blog's tech regulator said the site's blue tick system could deceive users. It said malicious actors were abusing the feature. Live from London, that's the latest BBC News.
Welcome back to Business Matters here on the BBC World Service with me, Rahul Tan, Colin Peacock, who of course is there in New Zealand for us. We've got Lorianne back, who is in the US. Lorianne, your final thoughts on that Biden situation? We were talking there before we lost you briefly about the donor situation and the money, the importance of money, because it's an incredible amount of money that's spent on the US election. So donors maybe have more influence in the US than they do in other parts of the world.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, they spend, millions upon millions of dollars. I mean, you're looking at $90 million that's essentially being frozen, if you will, from the big donors that they want, that they would like to see somebody else run and pick up the torch. They don't want somebody just giving the good old college try. They want to win. Because, the ramifications of having Biden at the top of the ticket, it could impact the Senate race. It could impact the House race. These are legitimate concerns of, House members and Senate and senators. Now, if Biden did step aside, the $90+ million that's already in the Democratic National Committee, that can go to the next nominee. So it's not like that money that's already been pledged is just assigned to Biden. That money will automatically go to whoever runs. But, with each passing day,
Lorianne, we have got most of what you were trying to say there, but I'm afraid we'll disagree. We have spoken a lot about President Biden. I'm sure there will be continuing debate across the world service again with further developments. But let's move to Saudi Arabia now, because it is importing oil, and it is the dirtiest time at levels that we've not seen for 3 years. Why? Well, I've been speaking to Kate Dorian, a non-resident fellow at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington.
They burn fuel oil and crude oil to generate electricity during peak demand period, which is now because it's very hot. And I mean, they've always done it. I mean, at one point they were burning up to 1 million barrels of crude and liquid fuels. It's not anything new. It's just that even as they increase their gas production and bring on renewables, it's just not enough. Because it's not only that there isn't enough gas, there's no pipeline connections to the areas.
The reason that they need more power at the moment is the fact that it's so hot. More people have air conditioners. One of the reasons.
And it's cheaper to import fuel oil and export crude, you see, because if they produce more fuel oil themselves, then it means they export less crude, which they are exporting. But
we have seen huge investment in Saudi Arabia into renewables. Is it possible to give a date when they won't need to burn this dirty form of oil anymore? Are we looking at a decade, more than that?
Well, I mean, their target is that by 2030 they're going to be 50-50 gas and renewables and do away with fuel and crude burn for electricity generation. That's the target. But, you know, it's if you look at the renewables, the percentage, I mean, the installed capacity is still pretty small. They may have ambitious targets, but it's less than 3 gigawatts at the moment, which isn't really enough.
But when you look at a country like Saudi Arabia, we see the rising temperatures that we're seeing across the globe. You would think that solar is something that, over the next few years, that they could really develop.
They are. I mean, by the end of this year, they would go up another from 2.8 gigawatts to 3.8 by the end of the year. And then by 2026, the target is 12.6 gigawatts. And then if you look at the longer term target, I mean, it's huge. I think they're talking about 100 gigawatts. So, you know, it's happening, but it's, you know, they started a bit too late. I mean, they're targeting 130 gigawatts by 2030. So that's, you know, that's a lot of gigawatts when you're starting off at 3 points. Let's say by the end of this year, it's going to be 3 to get to 130 gigawatts. That's huge.
Final question to you. If we talk more generally about the oil industry in Saudi Arabia, there is huge investments going on in the country. We've had a fairly volatile oil price over the last 12 months or so. Is that still a concern for the Saudis? What sort of price do they need oil to be at for them to be able to continue to make these huge investments into the country?
It's hard to tell. I mean, I would think that around 85 is quite comfortable for them. But it sort of depends because, you know, when you look at non-oil revenues, they're still, it's a bit skewed. You know, you look at non-oil revenues and a lot of it is when you see the numbers, you think a lot of it is taxes. A lot of it is oil-related industries. You know, it's still, I mean, Aramco still basically contributes to the budget. Without the oil revenues, they can't really invest in these mega projects, which of course they're shrinking because they realize that the targets are a bit too high. The NEOM and the line and all that, I mean, it's going to be a fraction of what it was supposed to be. And they need the oil money.
Kate Durian there, Colin, that is another example of the difficulties in the energy transition. You know, this is one of the great transitions that we're seeing in energy policy of any period. Where are we in New Zealand in terms of how you get your power?
Well, we're going backwards a little bit. We have a carbon neutral act which requires the country to be carbon neutral by 2030, so a similar target. And here Kate will speak about the Saudi target of 130 gigawatts by 20. I mean, that's extraordinary coming from where they are now. And of course, the headline on that story here in Saudi Arabia importing oil, it just feels counterintuitive. But in New Zealand, it's odd because although both of our main political parties have a bipartisan agreement on that carbon neutral bill, law basically, that passed into law, but we have a government now that's saying, sorry, we have to get the economy into gear. They've reversed the previous government's ban on fresh oil and gas exploration off the coast of New Zealand and our territorial waters. They're talking about mining, fossil fuel production for export, things we hadn't done before. So, yeah, it's politically, it comes and it goes. But as a country, we'll also be facing penalties if we don't meet our Paris Accord targets, and that will come on stream from 2030 as well. So there's a liability there to consider in economic terms as well.
It was interesting when you say it's like backtrack, but we're seeing in some parts of the world, many countries actually, a pretty more fierce debate about the transition in terms of the cost to economies. Is that something that's being heard in the debate in New Zealand?
Yes, very much so, and it's been led by one of our politicians from a minor party who's part of our coalition government, who's being quite belligerent about it. So, for example, when we've had infrastructure projects that might have been held up by concerns about the natural environment and various species of wildlife. For example, he's coming out and saying, look, you know, sorry, blind Freddy the Frog, you've got to go, because it's a reference to a rare species of frog held in developments on our west coast. So he's putting it out there saying, sorry, you know, none of this kumbaya stuff. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to make a strong economy, get productive, and really they're pushing the message that while it would be nice to be greener and bring the emissions down, in New Zealand our emissions are just a fraction of worldwide global emissions, and you know, we can't really afford to be what the previous government used to call a fast follower of new technology and the transition. However, this all impacts on our international reputation. And in fact, reading there about the Saudi Green Initiative and how much, when you look at it online, very easy to find all the public relations material about the efforts Saudi Arabia is going to create a green future. And yes, the importation of dirty oil for, you know, to cover a sort of short spike in the needs of air conditioning in the hottest months of the year, that very much cuts across all of that that sort of public relations.
Now, we would normally bring our other guest in here, but Lauriane, unfortunately, with those technical difficulties, we have said goodbye to her for the evening, so it is me and Colin for the rest of the programme. But Colin is one of our most experienced contributors. And actually, I was thinking about this before. I think you must have been with the programme almost since its inception, Colin.
I think so. I think, going back in my records, I think 2013, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not sure when it launched, but I think every now and then it drags up old emails that date back to 2013. So, yeah, I should have my 10-year laser badge.
Yeah. 11.
I mean, there are two, as we've heard about Biden and Trump, there are two ways to interpret that word veteran. But if I start making large pauses on or saying the wrong name, because, you know, accuracy really counts here, doesn't it, Brian?
It certainly does. And you know that bit before, Edward, when you were talking about the two old men on the golf course, I would like to reiterate, he was not talking about us, he was talking about President Biden and former President Trump. Let us move back to a story in the US, because gun ownership in America is a contentious issue. Critics say that weapons and ammunition are too easily available. So, a new development introduced in Alabama, Oklahoma and Texas, well, it is raising eyebrows. Automatic vending machines selling bullets will appear in grocery stores, with the manufacturers saying that artificial intelligence software means that this will be more secure than other sales. Cotton spoke to the CEO of American Rounds, Grant Majors, the company behind these machines, to find out how they work.
It will ask them to insert their ID. It'll scan the ID, and it's also going to determine if someone is 21. It'll do a facial recognition scan to make sure the person is who they say they are, and it's not someone who's trying to use someone else's ID or a stolen ID. And then only then, when the identification is verified that they're of legal age and they are who they are, can the transaction be complete.
What presumably it can't do is judge the mood of the person, tell if the person appears to be drunk or high on drugs or dangerously angry.
So in the United States, ammunition is sold two primary ways. It's sold off the shelf in retail stores, or it's sold online. Online, anybody who's a minor can simply click a button that says they're of age. Nobody can tell what state of mind they're in, who they are, how they are, and they can have ammo shipped right to their house. If they go to a retail store, ammo sits on the shelf, no different than right in a grocery store. And they can walk right up to the front register, check out like anybody else, and people generally don't ask for the ID. They're supposed to, but they don't. I've never been asked for my ID ever in my entire life when purchasing ammo. And not only that, it's a high degree of theft when it just sits on the shelf. Right? It's a very shopliftable item. One store, and I won't mention the name, in the Northeast had 500,000 rounds of ammo stolen. One retail store. So here in the United States, hands down, we are the safest, most secure method of ammo sales in the country.
What about the argument that goes, if it's got a computer in it, it can be hacked, that there is a vulnerability there?
People that have bad intentions, what is the more likely scenario? Are they more likely to go to a local pawn shop, which you can do here, and pay cash for ammunition and walk out? Buy it online and have it shipped to your house? Go shoplift it in a retail store because it sits on the shelf? or walk into a grocery store where our machines are located, security cameras monitoring it, hack the machine. You still have to use a credit card, use a driver's license, and have your facial recognition scan. When you look at the context of how ammunition is sold, it's still the safest and most secure method in the United States of selling ammunition.
When I first heard that story, Colin, I have to say that it was quite extraordinary. Listening to it again, I'm not sure. Are you convinced?
No, I mean, it reminds me of nothing more than if you go back 40 years, there was an album by the Californian punk band The Dead Kennedys, which was called Give Me Convenience or Give Me Death. And I think 40 years later, this offers both a vending machine for ammo. I mean, there was an excellent question asked there about, can the AI tell if someone is angry, uptight, intoxicated, which seems to me to be a very good one. But other than that, like, at what level is ammunition an impulse purchase? I'd be more concerned about this is catering to a disorganised weapons owner, because you think if you had a weapon, I mean, one of the things you're supposed to organise is safe storage. In New Zealand, they have to be locked away. For example, handguns are illegal, and if you suddenly find you're going out for the weekend hunting or whatever, and you haven't organised your ammunition, I'd be concerned about that. I think that these weapons should be used only by people who've demonstrated that they're able to keep them safely, and plan for their upkeep such that you don't require getting ammunition from the machine in a shop.
New Zealand, of course, nowhere. It's not like the US at all in terms of the number of shootings that take place, but people will remember some instances, particularly the shooting that took place at the mosque a few years ago. Did that lead to a debate about gun policy in New Zealand?
Yes, and a very rapid change to outlaw those semi-automatic weapons, the AR-15 style weapons, because they have no use in hunting, and simply no reason really for people to have them outside of the military. So those weapons were outlawed. But the current government has a firearms advocate now as previously a firearms advocate and representative as a cabinet minister, and they now want to change the Arms Act. They're very wary about creating a uniform gun registry, and we're also seeing that the changes, the amnesty was produced to bring in those semi-automatic and other illegal weapons and destroy them. That hasn't stopped armed robberies and illegal weapons being passed between armed gangs and things like that are turning up and being used in shootings and even organised crime. So that's given ammunition, excuse the pun, to those who say it's the people, not the weapons, and the rules that people abide by, well, they only capture the people inclined to abide by the rules, and you can't stop the problem. But certainly, ammunition, gun stores, very, very unusual, very regulated, and I think that does help stop the spread of weapons, to the point where we don't have to have armed police officers, for example.
Yeah, let us move to a part of the world which has seen a huge increase in the amount of guns that are there, which has caused huge problems in society. That is Colombia, because its president, Gustavo Petro, said that armed conflict in his country would end within a day if the UN declared cocaine legal across the world. He said it was regrettable that most countries wouldn't agree to legalize drugs for what he called political reasons.
If tomorrow the United Nations Commission on Drugs would say that cocaine is legal, tomorrow the war in Colombia would be over. It is as simple as that. But as this is not possible for political reasons, or will not be possible for a long time, the war in Colombia continues.
Sergio Guzman is the director of the Colombia Risk Analysis.
It's not surprising. Petro is known for making inflammatory remarks. He's one for the headlines, and oversimplifications like this sound commonsensical, but are in fact almost impossible to achieve. You need global consensus to achieve this, and even if you did obtain it, then sort of sorting out how this would unravel and help Colombia address some of its major problems would of course be an issue. And that's one of those things that he is very good at, catching the headline and not really taking responsibility for the aftermath.
But in some ways, is he not because Latin America, the Caribbean, these are becoming the most violent parts of the world because of the drug problems that exist within them.
I think he's right in the sense that we ought to have a global conversation about this, but the problem is he's not laying the groundwork for that global conversation to be successful. I think countries like China, the United States, places like the European Union are not going to support outright drug legalization. Colombia hasn't even legalized marijuana consumption. So Colombia is asking countries to go above and beyond something that's not even willing to go the first step towards.
Colombia is the world's biggest cocaine producer, isn't it? How big a part of the economy does it remain?
Several economists have tried to pin down the economic impact of cocaine. The number that they've come is somewhere between 3 and 5% of GDP. But it's very difficult to actually track the significance of cocaine to our economy, considering obviously it's an illicit income and the money flows are all in cash or through third parties, and money laundering is quite difficult to track.
But it's not just criminal gangs, it's also rebel groups who are involved in the trade. So you can see why he says that legalization of cocaine would end that armed conflict.
In a way, it would make it more difficult for these groups to continue thriving on illicit gains. It would also fill the government coffers because it would be able to tax at a very high level so these income flows. And so the thing is, yes, it would give the state much more revenue to deal with some of the country's pressing problems, and it would essentially take away from these groups a very important source of financing. However, it's not clear how that would impact or influence rural areas in terms of good governance or state capacity, etc. So I do think that there's a big piece of the puzzle that Petro's trying to simplify that is going to be difficult to meet.
Sergio Guzman there. Colin, it sounds like one of those ideas that when a politician says it, it seems interesting, but when you sort of look a little bit closer, Sergio did there for us, it's very unlikely to happen.
Yeah, it's just what Sergio said it right at the end there. That was what was going through my mind with the complete ignorance of how things really are in Colombia. But if you've got a situation where in Colombia and some other countries, the army has been deployed against producers and even cartels making and distributing it, well then if you do uniformly legalize it and then try to tax it, effectively make it a trade, a legal trade, well then what do you do with the power base in all these places where they've had to deploy their own armed services against them? I can't see them just giving up control like that. So how do you stop, even if it's legal, you stop a black market developing that undercuts that? But you're certainly also hearing, if you're talking about 3 to 5% potentially of the GDP, and of course no one can know because it's all illicit in a cash trade and so on. But if you were able to boost your GDP by that much at a fell swoop, over a course of 5 or 10 years or something,